Hey friends, Reverend Nick here. A quick announcement about what is going on here at the church this summer. In order to give our staff and volunteers some much needed time off and a well-deserved break, we're going to mix it up a little bit. We're going to have worship in different ways all throughout the summer. So for the first 2 Sundays of July, we are going to be doing Zoom church. Instead of going to our website or YouTube for a worship service, we're going to go gather on Zoom. We have a team of amazing volunteers who are ready to facilitate a service on Zoom. It's a chance to not just connect with God, but also see each other, to actually have some conversations with one another and connect to God that way. It's going to be so great and so amazing. You can find links to that in all the usual places. And then for the other 2 weeks of July, we're going to have, we're back on YouTube, and we're going to have my wonderful friend, the Reverend Brianne Swan, with us. She is great and amazing and wonderful. She's going to preach and lead us, and we might even get some music from her as well. You can find those services on YouTube and on our website, all the links in the usual places. And then for August 1st, 2nd, the first Sunday of August, whichever one that is, we are actually going to be taking a Sabbath. Church-wide Sabbath. We are encouraging everyone to just go and do something that is restful, something that is physically, relationally, spiritually rejuvenating. Take some time and go and do that. And then come back and tell us about it. Tell how that was actually worshipful for you. And we're going to just have a great time just resting, taking a break together and practicing that sacred art of rest. And then for the rest of August, we are back on YouTube, 10 a.m. as per usual. And then September, my friends. Well, I'm going to tell you about that next. So, come summertime. Great stuff is happening. Church is not closed. It's going all throughout the summer. Hey friends, it is Nick from the church, and I have a really special update for you. One I know you've all been anxiously waiting for. Here at the church, we are working on our homecoming strategy. That's what we are calling our plans to phase back in some physical services, programs, and events. We thought about calling it our reopening strategy or our return to church strategy, but then we realized the church has never been closed, and we've never not been the church. Church has been happening this whole time. And we thought reopening had a nice ring to it. It evokes that sense of warmth, of excitement, of togetherness, of tradition, of joy. And so we are rolling with our homecoming plan. And it will kind of show you what our plan is and what our strategy is to phase back in all those things we know and love. It will detail the kinds of conversations that we're having, these big, hard conversations about how do we open up and keep it safe and keep it affirming for everybody. It'll help outline some of the things that we're hoping to leave behind, that we're hoping to bring with us, and even that we're hoping to try new and experiment with and play with as we try to do church in this brand new world we're entering into. And so stay tuned for all of that information. It is going to come your way soon as we figure out these really complicated and important steps. But for now, 2 really important, fun, awesome, great things to tell you. 2 things to put on your calendar, 2 things that we can look forward to. On September 19th, this coming September, we're going to have a homecoming party. That Sunday morning, 10 o'clock at the church, we're going to have a party. We're going to have a time where everyone who calls Red Deer Lake home can come to be together in person at the church building and just see each other and enjoy being in community, to catch up, to connect, and get excited about coming back to be the church in person together again. So that's September 19th. And then the following Sunday, September 26th, we're going to have our first in-person church worship service. Yeah, an in-person service. 10 a.m. at the church, September 26th. We're going to gather together inside the church building for a time of connecting with God, each other, and ourselves. It's going to be so good. I am so excited to enter into the fall with courage, with excitement, with joy, ready to be the kind of church that God is calling us to be. And so all of this, of course, is all conditional and based on AHS protocols and regulations and restrictions, but we are setting up some prayers. We are knocking on wood. We are crossing our fingers that we will be allowed to do this. And we know it's going to be such a great, beautiful, and important time of being the church together. So please put those on your calendar and stay tuned for more information on them, but also our homecoming plans that will all be coming your way soon. My friends, peace be with you. Welcome back to a Sunday service with Red Deer Lake United Church. My name is Nick. I am one of the ministers here, and we are an affirming church that gratefully gathers on Treaty 7 land. And what we are all about is finding in the way of Jesus, this new way of being human and alive in this world. This way connected with God, each other, and ourselves. This way of life rooted in those sacred values of hospitality, community, compassion, justice, and spirituality. This way of life that transforms us so we can go out and help transform the world, turning it into one where everybody has enough and everyone has a place. Yeah, that is who we are. That is what we are all about. And this, as we said, is our Sunday service. This is a thing that we do each and every week where we take the time to pull over, to press pause, to slow down, to gather in diverse and inclusive community, and do that one thing that we have to do to be truly, fully, and wholly human. Connect with God, that source of life, that ground of our being, that mystery underneath it all, that spirit of life, that spirit that makes all things new. And so whoever you are, wherever you come from, however you got here, whyever you're here, may you know this. Seriously, know this, hear this, please. You're in the right place. This is a good place to be. Our hope and prayer is that you'll leave here feeling seen and heard. You'll feel a bit more rested, a bit more full of life. You'll leave here more alive than you came in with. As we said, this is an affirming community because we believe God is a God of extravagant and indiscriminate love, and that means that everyone belongs here. There is room for all of us and all of us. So before we get into the rest of the service, let's take some time to lean into this community. Let's take some time to be here, to connect, to know that we can be together even though we are apart. And so on your screen over on this, I get this wrong every single time, this part of the screen, there is our chat box. And this is only if you're watching on Sunday morning. If you're not, the chat box is going to be down on the bottom. We'd love for you to say hi. Take a moment to say hello. Let us know where you are from. Let us know how you are doing. And that can be a great way where we can stay connected and practice being in that affirming, safe, brave, and inclusive community. So take some time to do that. And we are going to jump into our service. We've got a lot of really amazing, good stuff today. We've got some music. We've got a poem. We're celebrating National Indigenous Peoples Day. We've got a sermon about what to do when those impossible, overwhelming cosmic forces threaten to drown us. All kinds of good stuff. But let's start with this. We're going to start with a song from our music team. They've done a great job putting it together. And use this song to finish arriving. Use this song to choose to be here, to know that you can bring in all that is within you and all that is around you. And use this to open up, to soften up, to breathe in that spirit that makes all things new. And so my friends, whoever you are, wherever you are from, whatever's going on in your life, as we head into this time of connecting with God and one another, may peace be with you.
Torn with many a rift, if
And so feeling the presence of God within us and around us, and knowing that in this place we're welcome, we're wanted, and we're accepted, let's start with a prayer. So my friends, would you bow your heads and pray along with me, please? And let us pray. So God, here we are. All kinds of people, from all kinds of places, with all kinds of stuff going on in us and around us. But we are here to connect with you. For you are the giver of life. You are the mystery underneath it all. You are that thing behind it all. And we're coming to you to help us feel more alive. To help us find a bit of grace and compassion. To help us heal and become whole. To help us become the kinds of people that you made us to be. People of light, love, and life. So as we enter into our time together, be with us. Help us to open up and soften up. And we ask that you do your thing. And we say this in the beautiful and liberating name of Christ by saying together, Amen. So today in Canada is a really special holiday. It is National Indigenous Peoples Day. It is a holiday that's meant to encourage us to not just recognize, to not just learn about, but celebrate all the different Indigenous cultures in our country. And this is, I think, a really important holiday for us right now, especially as we come off the discovery of even more mass graves at different residential schools in our country. This is a day where we can really do the work of being anti-racist. Where we can really do the work of reconciliation. We can really do the work of trying to become better allies and advocates and accomplices with our Indigenous siblings. So we're going to put some links down below in the description of how you can go and do that as individuals and families. But today for our service, as we head into the grace and renewal part of our service, we're going to be listening to one of my favorite Indigenous teachers, Richard Twiss. And he's going to speak to us a bit about the importance of the words and images that we use to talk about God, a bit about the importance of the practices we use to connect with God, and how context, the places where we are, the places where we exist, the things that shape and inform us are super, super holy. So we're going
In the Lakota language, Wakatanka is our name for creator. It more or less translates out great spirit, great mystery. But for many years it was not allowed for Christ followers among the Lakota people, so we had to say Jesus, or the weird Germanic tribal word Gut or Gott, which is translated God. So we had used some weird Germanic pagan word for Jehovah. And we were never allowed to use our word, Wakatanka. And so whenever a people group is forced to use other people's images and symbols and music and liturgy that's not born out of the soil and soul of their own lives, then it always makes Christianity a little bit somebody else's religion. And it always forces you to conform in some very deep-rooted way in terms of identity, who God made me in His likeness and in His image as a Lakota guy. And so for our people, the struggle has been for a long time, and I think the same is true for Indigenous people all over the world. When do we get to be who God made us as Christ followers versus being a good English Puritan or a German Lutheran or a Swedish or French or whatever? So this whole point of liturgy, really ways we express to God our worship, our reverence, our fear, our love. Unless we're able to do that with our Lakota drums and our Maasai dancing and our Zulu singing and our Quechua music and all the others, we're just continually borrowing somebody else's stuff, because somewhere along the line a missionary said, our music is God's music. Your music is pagan, And so it's about time, if you're going to be a real, true biblical Christian, that you be like us. I heard somebody say that God created us in His likeness and image, and we've just returned the favor. So imagine it's the conservative evangelical who says, God, you created us in your likeness and image, and so we've just returned the favor. Now you're just like us, and we're going to treat everybody the way we treat everybody in your name. So isn't that kind of how Christian mission always goes, whether it's the Portuguese or the Spanish or the Catholic or whoever? It's like everybody wants to make us indigenous people in their likeness and image for our good, of course. And so the whole point of worshiping in the context of who God made us, I think, is a key conversation all over the world. And until we can really come to that point of allowing other people to be who God made them, unless we can acknowledge that all of us like things better than other things, musically, culturally, which is totally normal and okay. I don't have to like that in terms of that's my favorite. But unless I can learn to love my neighbor's music, like my music, until I can learn to love my neighbor's way of living, like mine, his or her liturgy, the food they eat, the way they raise their kids, all of that. Because I love the way I do it, and so Jesus said, if you can't love your neighbor whom you can see, how can you love God whom you can't see? And loving our neighbor is not this ethereal, esoteric kind of experience. It's my neighbor and their music and their ways. So really this whole point of identity goes to the heart of what it means to follow Christ and to be liberated through the power of the gospel to worship Him in ways that are both meaningful to us and put a smile on Wakantanka's face.
So good, right? Yeah. Context is holy. And so for the rest of our grace and renewal, but certainly for the rest of the week, we have some questions we want you to reflect upon. What language and imagery for the divine can we grow in our soil? Which is to ask, how can we stop using language and imagery that was just given to us and actually cultivate our own? What would happen if we saw everyone else's context as holy? And instead of seeing ours as the only right way, what if we saw it all as sacred, good, and holy? What would it look like for you or for us to break free of someone else's way of worshiping? And we actually began to nourish and invent and discover our own. Yeah, what would happen? These are the questions I want you to rumble with today and this week. So take a screenshot of this if you want, jot them down, come back to this part of the service later on. We'll put these in the description as well. But what would happen if we remembered that context is holy and that we each have a way of talking about and imagining God? We each have a way of connecting with God that is just as holy, good, sacred, and beautiful as the next. Yeah, powerful, good, important questions, especially as we honor and celebrate National Indigenous Peoples Day. And so with all this in mind, we're going to listen to a poem now. This is a poem written by an Indigenous author, read by Patty, a member of our community. And it is a way of embracing someone else's language and words for God, as seeing it as holy, and letting it draw us into an encounter with that divine spirit that makes all things new. And so, my friends, as we head into this grace and renewal, may we hear this poem as sacred. May we recognize its author and reader as sacred. And may we let these words go to work. And so as we hear this poem called Praise the Rain, may peace be with you.
Praise the rain, the seagull dive, the curl of plant, the raven taught. Praise the hurt, the house slack, the sound of trees, the dignity, Praise the dark, the moon cradle, the sky fall, the bear sleep. Praise the mist, the warrior name, the earth eclipse, the fire leap. Praise the backwards upward sky, the baby cry, the spirit food. Praise canoe, the fish rush, the hole for frog, the upside down. Praise the day, the cloud cup, the mind flat, forget it all. Praise crazy, praise sad, praise the path on which we're led. Praise the roads on earth and water. Praise the eater and the eaten. Praise beginnings, praise the end. Praise the song and praise the singer. Praise the rain, it brings more rain. Praise the rain, it brings more rain.
So, a reading from the Gospel according to Mark. On that day, when evening had come, Jesus said to them, the disciples, "Let's go across to the other side." And leaving the crowd behind, they took him with them in the boat, just as he was. Other boats were with him. A great windstorm arose, and the waves beat into the boat, so that the boat was already being swamped. But Jesus was in the stern, asleep on the cushion. And they woke him up and said to him, "Teacher, do you not care that we are perishing?" He woke up and rebuked the wind and said to the sea, "Peace, be still." Then the wind ceased and there was a dead calm. He said to them, "Why are you afraid? Have you still no faith?" And they were filled with great awe and said to one another, "Who is this, that even the wind and the sea obey him?" May we hear what the Spirit is saying to the church. God be with you. So let's start off. I just ran up the stairs. Man, this pandemic has been rough. Hold on. I must have been holding my breath. That's weird. Anyways, let's start again. Okay, ready? God be with you. So let's start off the sermon with a question. Has anyone ever wondered just why the heck we read these stories from the Bible? Why we spend so much time with them? Has anyone ever wondered, after riffing through them and finding these really weird, awkward, difficult to understand stories and parables, why we call these things holy? Anyone? I'm going to put my hand up because I think that every single time I read it, every single Sunday, I'm like, I got to read these things again? Like, come on, why? Yeah. Who's with me? Who is with me? And if your hand is up, if you are answering that question being like, yeah, man, you're talking about me, that story we just heard, it is for you. This one's for you because this story is such a really great example of why we do read these stories and why we call them holy. Because here's the thing. Here's the thing about these stories that we read, especially that story we just read. It isn't simply just a story about something Jesus literally did 2,000 years ago. It can be that, that's fine. It could be about that. But it's also about something so much more. And this is why we say when we read these stories, we're not just looking for what they say, we're looking for what they say. You hear me on that? It's not just about what they say, it's about what they say. When we read these stories, what we're doing is looking for the thing underneath the thing. We're looking for the universal truth that is baked into the particular. What we're doing is looking for this ancient and divine meaning, truth, and wisdom that we believe these stories have to offer us today. Not just back then, but to us here and now, in our context, in our human experience as we try to figure out how to be human and alive in the world. These stories have something reverent, deep, universal to say to us in the here and now. That's why we read these things. Because here's the other thing. If we just took these stories at face value, if we just took that story we read and was like, oh, it's Jesus, he can calm nature, he can calm the wind and the storms, that must mean he's special, he must be like God. Well, cool, fine, that preaches, that's got some weight to it, that is a legit takeaway. That is something we can hold on to and sit with, that can go to work in us, and there is something beautiful, reverent, and true about that. But the thing is, if we stay there, if we only, this is like the worst analogy ever, but to stay there, to only go that deep, it's kind of like only taking that first layer off of a 3-layer dip. Like the top layer is okay, but the bottom layers, that's where the good stuff is. That's where it all comes alive. That's where you experience the joy of it. Yeah, to only stay up here is to miss all of that. It's to miss out on the thing underneath the thing. It's to miss out on the very fact that this isn't just a story about how Jesus is divine because he can quiet the wind and the rain and the storms and the sea. But rather, it's to miss out on how this is a story about all those insurmountable, super powerful, even cosmic forces that work in our world to stop us from having the kind of life we're meant to have. Yeah, this is a story about that. This is a story about overcoming those insurmountable, powerful, and even cosmic forces that try to stop us from having the kind of life that we're meant to have. Yeah, this is a story about that. And we can see this. We can see this by taking some time to zoom out and get a deeper sense about what exactly is going on here in this story. And so let's break it down, and then we'll try to put it back together, and we'll see if we can see that thing underneath the thing of how this is a story, about this, but also about this. And so let's go back to the very beginning. Because the whole thing starts off by Jesus telling his disciples that he wants to go to the other side. Now this is a big deal. Because the thing he wants to go to the other side of is the lake. This lake of Galilee. And now this is a huge, huge deal because the other side of the lake of Galilee wasn't simply the other side of the lake of Galilee. The other side of the lake was the Decapolis. See, for small town good Jewish boys like the disciples, the Decapolis might have well have been the other side of the universe. For them, it wasn't simply far away. It wasn't even on their maps. It wasn't a part of their world. The people and place over there, it was outside of their faith, outside of their worldview. It was outside of their consciousness. Because for them, when it came to a life of fullness, of richness, of depth, meaning, and purpose, when it came to the kind of life that God wants us to have, for them, you found that life by staying with what you know. You found that life by playing it safe, by keeping it simple, by keeping it comfortable. You found that life when you were surrounded by people who look like you, who think like you, who act like you. That's where you find that life. For them, they thought to find God, to find life, all you had to do was stay home. And maybe you can see where this is all going. Here's a story about Jesus saying, I know you are taught to stay within this world, but I want to show you how your world is so much bigger. Yeah, that's what this story is about. It's not simply about geographical movement. This is a story about spiritual movement, about the kind of movement it takes to find the kind of life that God wants us to have. What the wisdom of our tradition says, and we can see this here in this story. What the wisdom of our tradition says is that life isn't found by staying put. It's not found by surrounding yourself with people who look like you and think like you and act like you. It's not found by being safe and comfortable, with staying with what you know, by playing it easy, by remaining where you are. But rather, life, the kind of life that hums with reverence, the kind of life that is rich, deep, meaningful, the kind of life that God wants us to have, that was always meant to be, that life is found by going to the other side, by venturing out, by being stretched, by being challenged, by leaving it all behind, by crossing borders and boundaries, by breaking down boxes. The wisdom our tradition has to offer, the wisdom this story has to offer, is that life is found in and through the movement. Yeah, you with me? Life is found in and through the movement. Not by staying put, not by staying with what you know, not by doing the same thing you've always been doing, but life is found in and through the movement. Life is found by traveling to the other side. And now sometimes when we talk about this movement, sometimes we're talking about outward movement. We're talking about, like in this story, crossing literal boundaries and borders. It's found by engaging with people and places you've never been before. It's found by listening to perspectives you've never heard before. It's found by literally moving somewhere new. But it could also be inward movement. It's movement by going into our wounds, by welcoming a part of us that we've always kind of stuffed down and struggled with. It's found through learning and growing. Those are the kinds of movements that we're talking about here. And I think we all know what we're talking about, don't we? We know how holy that movement is. We've experienced it before. We're talking about those moments, those movements, when we encounter someone completely, fundamentally different than us. But through getting to know them, through listening to them, through our interaction, suddenly we find ourselves different. Suddenly we find that our worldview has shifted, so much so that we find ourselves thinking differently, behaving differently, speaking differently, caring about things we've never cared before, voting differently. We find ourselves experiencing a much more complex, but so much more vibrant and richer life than we've ever have before. Yeah, do you know what I'm talking about there? Yeah, we've experienced that before, haven't we? Whenever we hear someone's story, we experience this movement. We're also talking about the work we do in therapy when we begin to learn why it is we are the way we are and why we do the things that we do. And suddenly unlocking that door and moving into those wounds and those experiences, life becomes so much bigger. Because we've encountered healing, we've encountered growth, we've encountered transformation, and suddenly everything is different. Yeah, that's the kind of movement we're talking about. Or we're talking about those times when we have fought and argued with our partners, our friends, or our family members, and how it's through that movement of going back and forth, learning, understanding, digging, suddenly life gets better. Suddenly through understanding, through listening, through hearing, we're in a completely different space than we were. And it's through that movement that life has happened. Yeah, you know what I'm talking about? Yeah, that's the kind of stuff we're talking about. That's how life is found in and through movement. And when the story starts off with this commandment to go to the other side, what it really begins with isn't simply a trip to the other side of a lake, but rather this invitation to sacred and holy movement, to go over there. Because it's there on the other side, that's where we begin to experience the life that God invites us into. Life as it's meant to be. Are you with me? You with me so far? Anyone know what I'm talking about? Yeah, I think we all know what we're talking about here. We've all experienced this. Which, of course, makes us have to talk about the thing that I know we're all thinking about. We got to talk about sea monsters, right? Yeah, you heard me. Sea monsters. we got to talk about some sea monsters right now. Because whenever we see the word sea in the Bible, whenever that image or geographical location kind of pops up, whenever that imagery is being used, we're usually always talking about something more than simply a body of water. What we're talking about when we talk about sea is the place of chaos and the place of death. Because all throughout the Bible, and certainly the rest of human literature too, the sea has always been associated with monsters. It's this way to talk about those monstrous forces in our lives and our world that cause chaos and death. It's a way to talk about those huge, powerful, insurmountable, overwhelming forces that threaten to drown us, that scare us into running away and giving up and caving in, those things that root us in defeat and despair, that make us stuck, those forces that keep us from moving deeper and deeper and deeper into the kind of life we're meant to have, those things that stop us from venturing out to the other side. And so when we get to the part of the story where the disciples are freaking out because of the storm at sea, it's not just literal. It's way deeper than that. It's actually existential. They're experiencing all those things within us and around us that try to stop us from moving towards the other side. That try to stop us from experiencing life from happening. And again, I think we know these forces. I think we know what the disciples are experiencing. We're talking about things like fear. We're talking about oppression. We're talking about hate. We're talking about cynicism. Yeah, cynicism for sure. Oh, we're talking about resentment. We're talking about perfectionism, expectations, traditionalism. We're talking about tribalism. We're talking about racism, homophobia, patriarchy, sexism, and ableism. We're talking about all those things that feel too big, too powerful, too overwhelming, that we just can't get through them, so we give up, we cave in, and we remain stuck on the shore, not even risking venturing out. Yeah, that's what we're talking about. Those are the forces at work in this story. Anyone know those things? Anyone ever experienced those forces? Yeah, I sure have. If the fear of rejection has ever stopped you from sharing your heart, yeah, you know what we're talking about. If the news about another mass grave, or the news about another hate-filled act of violence has ever made you just want to give up, thinking, you know what, we can never solve racism, we can never solve hate and division, it's just too much. Yeah, you know what we're talking about. If you've ever tried to lead change in a family, group, or community, you know the forces we're talking about. Those very real, powerful forces that make us want to surrender, give up, give in, and remain stuck in place. Those forces that even sometimes straight up drown us. Yeah, that's what we're talking about. Those are the forces at work in this story. That's what's underneath all the stuff that's going on here. That's the reality this story speaks to. It speaks to the reality of those insurmountable, powerful, and even cosmic forces that threaten to drown us and stop us from having life as it was meant to be. And it's a story that speaks to what we can do about those forces. And this is where we get into the hope and the good news that we can find in this story. And this is where we have to go into that really weird, but also kind of funny part of the story where the disciples are freaking out. They're bailing water out of their boat. They're thinking they're about to perish. And they turn to Jesus, who is taking a nap, who is sleeping at the helm of the boat. And they yell to him, hey, wake up, don't you care that we're perishing? And then Jesus does that thing where he stands up and he says, be quiet, peace. And suddenly the wind stops the sea becomes calm. Those forces vanish. And he turns to the disciples and he says, have you still no faith? Have you still no faith? Have you still no faith? Which, I gotta tell you, I find super, super interesting, because here's the thing. Here's what it sounds to me like he's saying. It kind of sounds like he's saying they didn't need to wake him up from his nap. Anyone with me on that? That's what I hear him saying. It's like he's saying, you woke me up for this? Guys, you know better. We've been through this. We've talked about this. You've seen so much, and you still have no faith? That's what I hear him saying here. It's almost like he's saying we don't always need to be asking him for help. Because here's the thing I think he might be saying. Here's the thing we need to remember whenever we talk about faith. When we talk about faith, we're not simply talking about believing that Jesus is God. We're not simply talking about going to church. We're not talking about believing in the Bible. We're talking about something so much bigger than those things. Something those things all flow out of. When we talk about faith, first and foremost, most fundamentally, what we're talking about is a trust in the fundamental nature of the universe. And it's this trust that says there is something bigger and there is something more powerful than those forces that try to drown us and stop us from experiencing life as it's meant to be. It's this trust that says those things, those forces, they don't get the final say. They are not definitive, that you can survive them because there is something bigger than those things. Something we call love, something we call spirit, something we call Christ, something we call source, something we call God. There's something bigger than those things. This thing that instead of trying to take us away from life, this thing that actually moves us towards it. This thing that instead of trying to divide us, unites us. That instead of trying to tear us down, builds us up. Instead of trying to hurt us, heals us. Instead of fostering fear, fosters love. Instead of trying to make us want to go back, makes us want to keep on going. Faith, our tradition says, is having trust in that there is something bigger than those things. To have faith, our tradition says, is to have the trust that life will always win. It's to live with the knowledge that we don't have to listen to those forces that seem so big and so powerful. It's to trust that God is a God of life. And because God is a God of life, life will always, always, always win. Yeah, that's what it means to have faith, is to have trust in that. And I think this is what Peter Rollins is getting at when he says faith is a lived protest against forms of life that threaten existence as worthless. Let's read that again. Faith is a lived protest against the forms of life that treat existence as worthless. Oh, that is so, so good. Faith is a lived protest against all the things, all the forces that threaten and diminish the goodness of life. Oh, so good, right? That's what we talk about when we talk about faith. And so no wonder Jesus called the disciples out. No wonder he said what he said. When confronted with that storm at sea, when confronted with all those forces, they didn't need to wake him up from his nap. They didn't need to call on him for help. All they needed to do was remember to trust. All they had to do was to hold on to the truth their faith gives them. That God is bigger and that life will always, always, always win. Yeah. That's all they had to do. That's all we have to do. And I love this story so much because it reminds us of that. It reminds us of the reality of those forces, but it also reminds us what to do when we encounter those forces. That when those things do rise up and say, no, go back, stop, you're not going to make it, it ends here. This story reminds us that it's in those moments that we must remember to have faith. That it's then that we have to do the really, really tough work of trusting that God is a God of life. That God will help us persevere and get to the other side because life does always win. Yeah, that's the thing we have to hold on to. That's the thing the story reminds us of. To remember to have faith when we're encountering those big forces in our world. This faith that reminds us, that gives us the trust that God is bigger than those things and that life will always, always win. That life always does go on. But I know that we're getting dangerously close here to it seeming like I'm saying, hey, all you have to do is have trust and nothing bad will ever happen. Yeah, we're getting super dangerously close to it coming across that way. So let's just pull over here for a quick second before we end. And let's make it clear that that's not what our faith promises. And I think we all know that. We've all experienced that. We don't have a faith that promises, oh, if you have faith, if it's strong enough, then you'll be good forever. Nothing ever bad will happen to you. God will just bless you with goodness and peace and happiness. Yeah, we don't have that promise. That's not in there. Our tradition actually says quite the opposite. It says that suffering does happen, that suffering will happen. And we know that we've all lived through that. Our faith doesn't promise us that, but what our faith does promise us is this: that resurrection does happen. That even when those forces do win, even when our boat gets swamped over, even when we do drown, even when we get sent back to the shore and we have to try again, life does go on. Resurrection does happen. The worst isn't the last. That life will somehow in some way rise up and go on. And that we will find ourselves on the other side. Yeah, that's the thing we have to remember. Along with all these things is that sometimes we will get sent back. But resurrection does happen. And so let's end with this. Let's end with some questions and then a quick little blessing. For all of us here, what movement do we need to make right now? What's the other side the Spirit is calling you to? Whether it's around you or within you, what is the movement that you are being invited to make? What forces are at work within you or around you that are telling you to stop? What are the monsters in your life? What is threatening you that you're going to perish and you should just go back? And so I invite you to take a moment to answer those. Let those answers rise up. But regardless of how you answer them, whatever is going on within you, whatever movement you do have to make, my friends, may you have the courage to trust that life is found in and through the movement. May you have the courage to step out and go into it. May you know that God is bigger than those things. And may you know that resurrection happens and that life will always, always, always win. And to that we say, Amen.
I was looking for songs and poems written by Native Canadians, and I realized that we have in More Voices hymnal a song written by Saskatchewan Cree composers, and it's called We Are All One People. It has a beautiful message of people living together in peace and harmony. I was able to find online a video recording, not the greatest quality, but it still gives you an idea of how this song sounds like. It's a praise song, sounds like a chant, it goes with drums, and the author, Joseph Nato Howe, sings it in both Cree and English. And he starts the song with a thank you note to the elders. So let's have a listen.
Hey, Katamskat na, Kakirapita Gotik, Ganaskomt na, because thank the elders for all coming out and all the storytellers. That was a beautiful afternoon. So, here we go. It's done in both languages. Dewa ko makan kawit sanit ko ya ko chispime. Pia ko tawan kite kisiko kiano kakio pia kwan kisena ko seno otaski. We are all one people, we all come from one creation way on high. We are all one nation under one great sky, you and I. We are all one people, we are all one color in her eye. Thank you all for coming out.
So my friends, that is everything for this week. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for doing church with us. It is our hope and our prayer that you're leaving here feeling a bit more alive, feeling a bit more connected, maybe a bit more grounded, maybe with something to hold on to. And we do hope you are leaving with the knowledge that even though there are those forces in our world that will try to drown us and stop us from moving to the other side, God is bigger than those things. And that we can trust that life will always, always, always win. That resurrection happens and life will go on. So may you leave holding on to that. But before you do go, a couple things to let you know about. If this was really great for you, if you're like, man, I want to talk about this some more, you are in luck. We are about to go jump on our church-wide Zoom call. The link is in the description. Come join us there. Whether you are new or you've been around for a while, we'd love to have you. We're going to keep this conversation going and just enjoy being in community. Being in this community where even though we are apart, we know that we are connected. So click on the link, come join us in a couple minutes for that. And if you have been enjoying these things, if you have been picking up what we're putting down, if these have been meaningful for you, if you believe the world needs more of this, please click the link that says donate in the description. Every little bit helps, and it all goes towards helping us be this church that tries to foster hope, meaning, and purpose in our world. Every little bit counts, and we are so grateful for all the ways and all the people that they give. And so please click that link. But as you go from this place, my friends, thanks again for being here. And may you go in peace, may you go in love, may you go and do it loudly. We love you, we miss you. We'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.